Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Rising Tide Talk. I'm Matt, as you know, and with me I have an expert TTRPG writer, designer, and world builder. She is one of the founding members of the Underground Oracle Publishing group, creating all kinds of beautiful and wonderful worlds. Specifically, the creator of the Harrow, the Blight Plane. Did I say that right, Jess? Harrow?
It is Harrow, the Blighted Plain.
Harrow.
Yeah, that's going to be world building lesson number one, which is if you choose a very cool name, don't decide to make it pronounced differently than the way this word is normally pronounced. I'm like one of those Starbucks moms where I'm like, no, it's pronounced Michaela. That's how you see it. But no, I did the same thing with Harrow. But yes, it's Harrow on this.
Yeah, there you go. Well, you are truly one of the masters when it comes to creating worlds, especially for folks to play in them. So I'm super excited to talk to you about, the things that you do when it comes to creating worlds. So why don't we jump right into our conversation? As always, I have three pillars for our chat today. We're going to start off with some foundational stuff, then we'll jump into kind of game design advice, and then last but not least, hopefully we'll get to talking about some tools and that sort of stuff. Before we do that, I do have to give everybody in the live audience the heads up. As always, we're going to save some time at the end for your live questions. There is a RT Talks discussion thread for today's conversation just above us in the Discord server. You can go there and post your questions for Jess about macro and micro world building there. And then depending on how many you put there, I'm gonna gauge the clock to make sure we have time to address your questions. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. I'll start with a softball, but that can, it can go big. So I'll leave it up to your discretion on how deep you want to go here. But
Okay.
What does world building really mean to you?
To me, it means creating the kinds of spaces and settings and environments that people who are experiencing them through whatever medium they're created for can get lost in the same way that I enjoyed getting lost in people's worlds when I was a kid. So world building is creating those spaces for people to rub up against and to explore and to really experience for themselves as fully as this world, but in your mind's eye. Like that's world building to me. It's just the goal is to create outside of the real life that we're currently in, a place for people to escape to or to experience without having to leave the comfort of their home.
Yeah, exactly. You get to experience something else and really explore and play somewhere else. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think, as storytellers and as creatives in the TTRPG space, everybody here listening is probably a world builder to some degree, I would imagine. And I think we all create our worlds and create content based off of those worlds differently. So I'd love, very briefly for you to kind of dive into your process for how you create, whether that be the world building or whether that be the whole publicate, like from world building to publication. I leave that to your expertise, but I'd just be curious to know what that creative process looks like for you.
Yeah, it's really different depending on the scope of the world that I'm planning on creating. Like because there's a big difference between exploring world building in a one-page TTRPG versus in like Harrow's a full core book that's like 300 plus pages. So
Mhm.
there's a huge swing in that. So my process always starts with inspiration. It's just it always starts with an idea that just won't go away, and then I kind of roll that around in my head for days or weeks or years, depending on what it is. And, as I'm rolling it around, things are getting added to it, kind of like a Katamari Damacy ball. Like things are getting added to it, it's taking shape, it's getting bigger. And I can see, all the avenues that I want to go down with it that I want people to experience. And then that will determine whether or not it's going to be something that's going to be huge or it's going to be something that's going to be slightly smaller. Like, do I want people to experience, like the difference between creating for Haro and creating for like one of our cipher shorts is that like a cipher short is a one-shot experience that you're having in a very typically weird setting and scenario. You've got the parameters set out, so your role building
Mhm.
there is pretty kept inside of this box that you've created for yourself, and that has been created for the people that are going to be experiencing it. Whereas with Taro, I can go down any avenue that I want to and dive into it as deeply as I want to. So the process there, it really varies depending on how in depth you plan on getting with the.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The process for role building is also super different depending on the kind of TTRPG you're creating for people. I'm speaking only to
Yeah.
TTRPGs at the moment, obviously, because of where we're at. But like if you're creating for a comic book or a movie or a video game or something like that, it's all a little different. But games, TTRPGs are more akin to creating world building for like video games than it is, for the most part, than it is to like a novelization or something like that. And if I'm creating something that I want someone to experience alone, that's going to be a very short form RPG, like something like a Wretched Alone game or something like we did No Mercy for Monsters. That's a really different experience in producing it and in building out that world than it is when you're doing something that is meant for like 5 people to roll dice at a table for an endless number of sessions. So the how you go about doing it really does depend on, the medium that you're working in, the system that you're working in, and how big the idea is in your head. I have some ideas that I know are so big in scope that they take years to work out, and I know they're going to be something very big. And then I'll have an idea that will hit me, and I'm like, oh, that's something that should be a 1 to 3 page TTRPG that I can get out in front of people fairly quickly and not have the same sort of I don't use the word emotional baggage, but there's a lot of emotional baggage that's tied to world building and world creation because you're really putting a lot of yourself in it. So there's different degrees of that you have to tug along with you. And then the more nimble idea you have, the smaller world that you have, it's much easier to get out there. So the process is a lot different.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Maybe I'm skipping ahead here, but this makes me wonder, Jess, when you're in this creative mindset, at what junction do you kind of put those parameters on yourself? Like it sounds pretty early on. Is that a correct assumption, or is it sometimes not that obvious?
It's different for I'm like everything is different for everybody.
Yeah.
So, and for me, sometimes I'll have something in mind, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be something very very small. When we first put Haro into the world, it was as a micro setting for fifth edition, and it was I think like 14 pages long. So I had this idea and
Yeah.
I loved it, and I've been working around on it for years. And I'm like, I want people to experience this. So we created this, like we put it out. It had like it's got the bones of Haro there. You can see it. It's like early history Haro. But then, as time takes by, we're exploring it more through stories, through playing, through all these things. I'm like, there's so much more to this world that we haven't been able to put out in front of people yet. So then, it continues to grow and get bigger. Sometimes the idea stays small. Like we're putting out I've been doing a few one-page games that are based in the second guest system, really simplistic system made for journaling. And most of the uplift there is on the person who's actually experiencing the game, who's playing the game.
Yeah.
They're doing a majority of the world building. That being said, I've created 2 of the 4 tie-ins that are going to be in that line so far. And I personally know what the world is like. I know what the people are like. I know what there's so much behind the scenes that no one else will ever see. But I know that it's there, and I needed that in my head in order to create these like 20 prompts on a 1-page TTRPG to get people to do these journaling and things. Yeah. So again, yeah, it's all over the place. But for me, it's really I intuit a lot. I go by gut feeling a lot, and every now and then my brain will have an idea, and I'm like, oh, that's a small thing. But the more that I'm working on it, the more that I'm pouring through it, the more that I'm adding into it, I can tell that it's doing the Katamari ball thing, and it's not going to be a small thing. It's going to be something that I have to make bigger.
Cool.
Which is very different than accidentally blowing out the scope of your project. That like this is something that should be happening way before you're planning on producing the actual product. So before you put it out in front of people, that's when you should be deciding how big it's going to be, so that you don't
Mhm.
accidentally destroy yourself with like bloat and getting out of scope. So those are 2 different things.
Yeah. Scope creep kills projects for sure.
Yes.
Awesome, awesome. I have a couple of small questions again with the foundation stuff, and then we'll jump on to some of the more advice section. I'd love to know what you consider to be the most important things to include in a setting to entice people to engage with it.
It really depends on a couple of things. It depends on who the intended audience for who do you want to experience your game, your TTRPG?
Hmm.
Who do you expect to want to interact with this? the audience for something, like Lancer is different than the audience for something like, the things coming out of Kobold Press, that sort of thing. So who's your audience that you're looking at? And then as again, going back to this being closer in line to developing worlds for video games than for like novels or things like that, is you need to put those little as a designer, as a game designer, you have to put those little bits that are going to entice the GM, to entice the players to experience the parts of the world that you want people to experience.
Hmm.
So that serves two purposes. That keeps people engaged in your world and wanting to explore it by putting those breadcrumbs there, and that also allows you to highlight the things that you want people to experience. Because once the book leaves your hands, no matter if it's 12 pages, no matter if it's 400 pages, it doesn't matter. You're hands off of that now. Whatever your canon is in your head, the people at the table are experiencing it entirely differently. And the game's going to go in places that you didn't expect, because that's just the nature of what we're doing here. So the things that you keep are the things that you highlight, are the things that you think appeal to your audience the most. What's most special about the world that you're having them explore? What's the cool things that the players are going to want to come face to face with? Be the GM. What's the cool thing the GM's going to want to explore with them? Those are the very big things right there. But honestly, just making the world feel lived in, making it feel like it is something that you can get lost in. So if talking on the on a larger scale, like Haro, then I've got a lot of stuff in there that I'm incredibly excited for people to get lost in and to walk around in, and even it's stuff that will never make it into the pages of a book. Stuff is the stuff that you need to have in your head, and if you get that in front of people, they'll see that and they'll run with that passion. If it's the audience that's meant to appeal to, they're going to run with that. They're going to feel that in you. An amazing article came out today called "Sicko Worldbuilding" from Mindstorm, the blog, which I'll link it. And it's a great article, and it talks about how you need to be an absolute weirdo about the worlds that you're creating. And I've never put it into words like that ever, but that's 100% true. Like I know Horo, I know the worlds that we're creating. Foxfire, I know Quakeloff, all these different things. I know better than I probably know our real world, which is not something to brag about as an adult woman, but the things that no one else will know or will never need to know. I know the
Hmm.
personal relationships of every NPC that I've got in the book. I understand them to a T. No one else needs to know that stuff, but I know them, and it makes me develop it better, and it makes me be able to have the material there to highlight, to entice people to explore. But it's all about making everything feel 3D and explorable. You don't want people to walk in and it feel like, the backside of a stage in a play where there's really nothing there. You want people to know that if I round the corner, there's things waiting for me. And that's the biggest thing for getting people to engage with it and getting people excited about it.
Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. And it kind of makes me think of like teaching people
Yeah.
in a way, right? Like I feel like teachers, to be able to teach someone something, you have to be able to understand the thing that you're teaching to a degree that
Yeah.
you know it so well you can simplify it. And I think that's exactly what you're saying here with world building. If you got to be the weirdo so that you know everything so that you can shrink it down to manageable bite-sized pieces. So I can really like I get that. That's awesome.
And we have to be a special kind of weirdo too, because we don't get to be like we have to be we're special weirdos here in the Rising Tide in this community in general. But you need to, because like I said, no matter what, once it leaves your hands, you're not going to be able to hover over the GM's shoulder and go, "Oh no,
Mhm.
this would never happen here. You can't do that. You can't do these things." So you have to be obsessed with your world, but you also have to understand that you're creating a playground for people, an amusement park for people, and you're way outside of it, just watching people explore it, but you have no input on how they're riding rides, how they're doing any of these things. You're building it for them to have that fun, and then you have to also let it go and go, okay, what they're doing right now or what I'm hearing is being done. I love that they're playing my game. It doesn't matter that it's not my personal canon for it. Most of us won't have the
Mhm.
luxury of creating like a bunch of additional media that's going to be around our world, like comic books and cartoons and all these really rad shit that we all want to create. Most of us aren't going to have that luxury. We're going to put out the one thing, or expansions on the thing, and that's going to be it. So we're never going to get the entire world out in front of people, not the world that we have inside of us, for the most part. But
Yeah.
you can, as long as you're willing to let people do that and not hold on, not be. You can't be a sicko that's holding on so tight that you destroy what you love. You have to be a sicko that lets it go. And you can always say, "I know the truth," but you have to let them experience it.
Awesome. Awesome. And then one other question, and this one I think is super important in the context of creating generally, but specifically in the context of creating a world or a setting. I'd love to know what kind of advice you might have for people when they're creating a world or a setting. How can they do that respectfully and free of stereotype that might be harmful to people in the world, like in our world? So what kind of things do you do to kind of
Yeah,
make sure or prevent that those kinds of harmful stereotypes or doing
yeah.
harm to communities in the real world?
And we've all seen that. Even people that have the best intentions sometimes will do that. That's just the world that we live in, and it's completely normal to see real world cultures and this history and be incredibly inspired by them. That's human nature. We're obsessed with those sorts of things, and it's totally normal and natural. I personally I prefer to create net new where possible. So most of I haven't come across these sorts of things yet, but sensitivity consultants are the biggest thing you can do. And a lot of my advice there would be if you plan on including something from another culture, I would, before you ever actually get anything too concrete down, kind of jot down your ideas for it, what you love about it, why you love it, all those things, those bullet points, that way you kind of have it clear in front of yourself. And at that point, kind of go to somebody who is a sensitivity consultant or part of that community and say, hey, this is where I'm at with this. I want to include this in my world because I love it for these reasons, but I don't want to do it in a way that's going to be disrespectful. I don't want to do it in a way that's going to hurt the thing that I'm trying to honor. So including people that early on is always a great idea because they're going to
Hmm.
tell you before you ever, you write a chapter out that you're going to have to rewrite. They're going to tell you, hey, here's some red flags you want to avoid. I like what you're doing here. You might want to change things here. Here's some history that you might not be aware of. You're going to learn during that experience more than you currently know just by interacting. And you're going to end up getting a fuller and richer creation out of it at the end of the day by including someone who actually knows these things and can speak to these things from a point of experience or a point of history. So that's my big recommendation there.
Yeah, I'm sure we have folks in the community here. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, if that's something, if you are uncomfortable or you are afraid, then create something net new. Then don't use the real world as experience. Use your imagination, and listen to the people around you. Sometimes we create something net new, and someone's like, "Oh, I think you got this from this," and you're like, "No, I didn't." But it's always good to know why they think that, just because that's going to come up again inevitably. And then you can also reach out to people and say, "Hey, what can I change about this?" or what that sort of thing. So communication is always really good. And no one's really going to get mad at you at that stage for doing these things. People are going to know that you're coming to them in good faith. They're not going to think that
Hmm.
you're coming to them, with any sort of ulterior motive. So that's not something you have to worry about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I would also add, I think, do your research, right? Like
Yeah.
there are so many like sources that you can go to, preferably sources from the inspiration that
Yeah.
match the thing that you're doing. But yeah, that combined with getting a second, third set of eyes to consult over it.
Yeah.
Yeah, A plus advice. Speaking of advice, why don't we move on to, some advice for turning worlds into published material? So you touched on it already a little bit, so feel free to skip ahead if you think there's not more to say. But I'd love to know, there's so many degrees of complexity involved in world building. You talked about smaller scale stuff for like a 1 page document or a 10 page setting document versus a 350 page source book. Where do you personally prefer to sit on that spectrum as far as creating goes?
If anyone has followed any of our stuff for a hot minute, they know that we're verbose individuals. We have a hard time not really laying the words down. We have so many ideas and want to get them all in front of you. So I prefer the more large scale world building. That's just where my heart is. It's something that I just
Yeah.
tend to do, and I've always done since I was a little kid. Naturally, just building these worlds out in my head. That's because those are the ones that as a kid and young adult and an adult now, those are the ones that I like to explore. I like to explore, like most of the time when I'm watching or reading or interacting with media in any sort of way, I'm really it's the world that I'm trying to soak in, like always around the characters, around everything. It's, why are the people, what are their motivations for doing this? Why are these things here? And most of the time, it's all world building. Character development is a part of world building. It's all world building.
Mhm.
So I like to do I prefer to do the large scale stuff, but the smaller scale stuff is really nice. And I just recently started doing that, honestly. The smaller scale stuff is nice because it forces you to, I think everybody should get out of their comfort zone here or there as a creator, just so that you know that you have those skills, you've honed them, and you learn something that you're going to be able to apply to everything going forward. If I never make another 1-page TTRPG or another 30-page, solo TTRPG, I've still learned things about that process that I can carry on always.
Mhm.
Everything has something you're learning from it. So it's refreshing. It's very refreshing to do those smaller scale things and to instead of doing the very concrete world building where I'm like, you turn the corner and you see this place, and inside of this place is this person, and this person has this secret, and the secret will lead you here. And instead of doing all those things, what you're doing with through these, like, for instance, through the Winter Guard or the Spring Rider, which were the two-second guest 1-page TTRPG, journaling TTRPGs, you're trying to evoke a certain feeling in people. So it's almost more that you're exercising an entirely different set of skills, where it's like, I know that I can't paint the world around you, but I can paint the feeling that I want you to experience while you're exploring this world. And I
Mhm.
can put in the tone that shows you the world from the way that I'm expecting you to experience, how I'd like you to experience it. And the same thing for No Mercy for Monsters. It's a Wretched Alone game, a 30-page long, great journaling game, awesome game. I have seen many different people play it. There's recordings of it. They did entirely different things. And one of the really cool ones was something that it was a modern version of it, which in my head I never would have imagined someone wanted to do like a modern version of it. And it was very like Buffy the Vampire Slayer almost,
Cool.
which was not at all in my head how anybody would experience this world. Like I thought, oh wow, this is this is going to be the way people walk the path. But that wasn't the way at all, and that's never really the way that it is. But that was a really good lesson to take away from doing that smaller scale thing, which is, even though it's super small, there were so many variables. There was so much, that people could just do with it that they took off and they ran with it without me. And that was it was a palate cleanser, definitely, because I go, they got the tone that I wanted, they got the overarching idea that I wanted, but the world is so different, in the way that they want to experience it in the game. And that was a
Totally.
very, very cool thing for me to be able to play with.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And like you said earlier, that's bound to happen, right? People are bound
Yeah.
to take your world and make it their own. And you know what? There's no better honor, I think, for somebody to do that, to feel comfortable enough in the setting that you've established to do that. Now, I asked some questions to the community about, their thoughts on world building, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but I got a lot of questions from folks that centered around, to some degree, explaining the differences between world building for your own game with your friends around a table, virtually or otherwise, and world building in the context of creating published material.
Yeah.
So I'd love, to kind of hear your thoughts on what some of the differences might be, maybe some suggestions or recommendations for folks listening who maybe have their own homebrew world that they've been playing in for years and want to kind of be inspired from that to create their own published material also. So kind of like converting it from a homebrew space into a 30, 40, 50, 100-page document to sell.
Yeah. I think the biggest difference that you're going to run into is that when you are face to face or screen to screen with the people that are around your table playing, you have absolute control over what they're experiencing in the game,
Mhm.
of your world. If you want them to visit this location today, they're visiting this location today. If you want them to face this creature today, they're facing this creature today. They're interacting with this NPC. You have it's your world. They're living and playing in it, and you have absolute control over it. It's a fantastic feeling. That is very different from creating that world and then handing it to 50 different people and never seeing what they do with it ever again. You hope that they go to that place and that creature and that NPC, but if you haven't built, the way for them to get there, that's just not going to happen. So you have to figure out the bones of your world, get that completely concrete and down, because there's also no more of the changing things on a whim at the table that a lot of us GMs love to do, which is I'm like, oh, I'm just going to alter this. This exists now, or this, doesn't exist now, or this never happened. You can't do that once it's printed and it's out there. You can do it later. You can do a retcon. You can do whatever you'd like at that point. But as far as anyone who owns that book is concerned, this is the world. There's no more adding or subtracting from it unless you create a follow-up, obviously. So that's a big difference that you have to keep in mind. And the loss of control is something that you have to understand that,
Yeah.
you, and again, if that's something that makes you uncomfortable, that's totally understandable. I see a lot of people, they're like, maybe you shouldn't be, world building. You should be like writing books, or you should be doing this. Which is all world building, but they're, not world building for TTRPGs if you expect people to behave the same way in the same circumstances every time. So you just, again, going back to the understanding that you need to create the place for them to have their adventures in, and not understand that you're not going to have any input after that. So those are the big differences between homebrewing and creating it, is, that loss of control, that inability to edit on the fly. Those are the two big ones that I
Yeah.
often see. And then also, sometimes world building, sometimes you think you want to do world building, and really what you want to do is you want to create an adventure, or an adventure path or a campaign setting, that's totally fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like if what you're in love with at the table is the story that's being told, and the chain of events and things like that, then you can develop a campaign setting, or an adventure path. And these things, you put your story in there for people to experience, and they get glimpses of the world along the way. That still counts. That's still a thing. But maybe just creating a single world book isn't your thing if people, if you're not used to, or if you're uncomfortable with things being very different, different tables, or you having that lack of control on how people are going to experience your world. Because world building is very, like, I don't know, maybe I'm a nerd, but world building is kind of like a really intimate thing, in a way. Like
Mhm.
you're creating this entire paracosm, and then you're inviting people to explore it. And that is, when it's at your table, especially, it's a very private thing. It's just your friends and the people that you respect or you have great times with, or that love what you do. They're the only ones experiencing it. And so when you take that and you turn it into a book, that world is now open to anybody who buys it. You don't get to choose who's doing those things, or you don't get to see who's doing it. So a lot of people can get kind of, uptight or uncomfortable, because it's like someone might approach them with a question or a misunderstanding of what they meant in the text. And that becomes like a point of contention, where it's like, no, you weren't supposed to do it that way. You're supposed to do it this way. Or no, that's not what I had in mind when I was creating it, or, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. But yeah, those are the big differences between building a world as a GM and building a world for a TTRPG.
Totally, totally. And you know what? I think that's a really important distinction. And people listening, I mean, I know in my head I kind of clump some of those kinds of materials together, but you're 100% right. You're right. Writing out an adventure where you're still doing world building because you're still peppering in elements of the estate or the province or the island or whatever, wherever this adventure is taking place, you're still peppering stuff in,
So,
but it's maybe more narrative focused.
yes.
So that might be an interesting way for people who have a world that they've been playing in for years to be inspired about one of their, their favorite series of 10 to 15 games and make an adventure out of it, as opposed to an entire book setting.
Yeah.
It's probably a lot less daunting to as like a first
Yeah.
project for people.
It's way less daunting. And you can squeeze world building into literally anything. I know I do. I'm
Mhm.
not sure if everybody appreciates it, but we stuff world building into everything. We created these like cipher shorts, which are basically they're just one shot adventures for the cipher system, and they last like 3 to 4 hours or whatever. And typically they are very quick to jump off. They kind of just plop you in a scenario, and you take off with it. So you might think at first blush there's not a lot of room for world building there, but you know you can, everything, every interaction that you have, the graffiti that you read on the wall, the little items that you find, the everything is world building. And there's always going to be something that like grabs people and goes, oh wow, this is a very, very cool world that I'm exploring. And they don't realize, even if it is in that one shot in a world that they will never experience again, you want them to leave the table and be like, oh, I wish I could fucking go back there. That was so great.
Yeah,
I can't
yeah,
wait to go back there. And I think one of the
totally.
best, like, as far as like probably was something that had the biggest impact on me, weirdly enough, as a kid, was like the flavor text on the bottom of Magic the Gathering cards. The flavor text on the bottom of those cards. I remember when I read it, like when I first read them, I opened like my first pack, and I think it was like the set 7 reprint or something. Like it was a bajillion years ago. But I remember I was looking and the art was magnificent, and so that was like kind of why we bought them originally, was because the art was just so ridiculous. But they had these like little lines of flavor text at the bottom, and I remember I was reading through them, and in just like a sentence, it would paint this. It would make me want to know more about what this world was about. It was like that
Yeah,
coupled with the
yeah,
art.
yeah.
I was just pulled in, and this was before I realized that they had like massive worlds that these card sets took place in. I was only experiencing it through the cards, and it still was pulling me in. So every little thing that you can add is an opportunity to do that exact same thing, to just to grab someone and make them want to experience the world that you have.
Absolutely, absolutely. We brushed up against it a few times now in our conversation, Jess. You brought up how the system or the kind of format that you're making your material or your published material for will have an impact on the world building that you're doing. I'd love to know, how you even go about picking a system for a setting or a world. Like what kind of goes into that decision, and what kind of advice might you have to share with people listening who are kind of debating, like, where do I focus my setting in? Do I do system agnostic? Like what's the best way about picking a system for the world that you might want to build?
Honestly, the system agnostic approach is one that I've been seeing a lot more of lately, which I think is rad. When I first entered into the scene a few years ago, like a few years ago, oh my gosh, time is a ass. I first entered into the scene, there wasn't a lot of people that were talking about, and I actually got a lot of advice against creating anything that was system agnostic, because they were like, nobody wants to just read your stuff. That's not something that people want to do. They want rules, they want mechanics so they can plop it into whatever they're playing and go for it, which is fair. But I've been seeing a lot of setting or system agnostic stuff recently, and I actually love the idea of creating system agnostic. That being said, I personally always like to pepper, I like to use the mechanics to help with the world building some. So that does kind of color when I'm creating a world. I'm always in the back of my head also kind of like, ooh, that would be a really cool dial for the player's turn or the GM to turn, or something really cool, like
Yeah.
mechanically for someone to work with. And then that kind of colors how what system I'm going to use for that world, because some of them do not work super well together. I mean, it's very, everybody knows the, oh, if 5e can do it all. Like everybody, it's because that's the thing that people are comfortable with. There's again, there's no shame in being comfortable in liking 5e. That is what it is. It's your
Mhm.
game. You like it. But there are some systems that do some things better than others, and some that don't. For instance, Horror the Blighted Plane is built on the Cipher system. So Cipher, especially Cypher First Edition, ran really heavily off like immediate use expendable items. That's like a core mechanic of the system. That wouldn't work with the world that we're our fantasy setting that we're working with
Mhm.
right now. It wouldn't make sense. But in Horror, the Crystal of Light has infused all these different items and creatures and everything with this, radioactive tower essentially. So it makes it make more sense that ciphers exist in this world. I can go explore a fungal oasis and find like these crystals or these creature parts or whatever that have these like abilities that I can harness for a second, because this is just the ambient energy of the plane seeping into everything. It makes a narrative sense to the world. It wouldn't make
Mhm.
sense if I was creating something that was super realistic or meant to be super dark and gritty in tone, that did not have that massive suffusion of magic in it. No Mercy for Monsters wouldn't have existed or wouldn't have been able to exist on the Cypher system or in 5e or any of that. It needed to be a wretched and alone game, because it was meant to have that from the start. I know that I'm going to fail tone to
Mhm.
it. And it needed that desperation and that urgency, and it needed that narrative drive. It needed that for that world that I was creating. So those things do color your setting. So if you are not planning, or if you find that you are creating a world and it's got these very cool features, or something that you really have to include, and the system that you're thinking about creating it for doesn't cater to that, instead of trying to hammer it until it fits, you can always look at another one. Or you can do,
Mhm.
like you said, completely system agnostic. There's been some incredibly successful books lately that have been system agnostic, and it allows people to use those with whatever system they're playing. And there's definitely no shame in doing that at all. I would definitely think that it would be better for your vision and for the experience of the people at the table if you do go system agnostic rather than trying to fit your world into the box that the system has set up for it already. Like, it's much better
Yeah.
to just get the world out.
It's almost like a blessing and a curse, right? Like in the context where the system complements the vision, then maybe it's the right choice to go with the system that does that.
Yeah,
And like you were saying earlier, you were talking about some games you want a specific tone or you want a specific emotion. Well, some systems have that tone or emotion baked into them already.
yeah, already. Yeah, so it makes it easier. And that's not to say that you can't, and that's not to say that you can't like go rogue and make, a grimdark setting and gumshoe or whatever you want to create it in. Like,
Yeah.
if you believe, do it. I'm not going to sit here and tell you not to give that a shot, because I know I've done some crazy things and they've worked out, or they've definitely not worked out, and I've made peace with that. So definitely don't let me say anything that's going to keep you from completing your vision. I'm just saying the mechanics of the game definitely do color how people interact with it, how people will read it, how people are going to experience it as a whole. So it is something to keep in mind. If you need to use Black Flag, use Black Flag, Daggerheart, like Cipher, like any of these any small system, any Lumen. We've done all these different things. If it fits it, that's magnificent. And if you can create extra little mechanisms for it, like I like to do, then that's also awesome. But just don't hamper yourself and don't hamper your world by trying to put it in an ill-fitting suit. It's better that you get it tailored.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Absolutely. All right, one last quick little question here in the conversion of turning something into a published material or what have you. And I'm looking at the clock, and we only have about 15 minutes left. So maybe there'll be kind of like lightning questions for the rest
Okay.
of the
I
for the rest of the conversation.
told you I was verbose. I'm sorry.
No, I love the answers. They're all amazing. I wouldn't change it for the world. I would love to hear about playtesting. I know we have an episode of RT Talks where we talked about playtesting,
We do.
but in the context of playtesting world building material, I think it's a little bit different, right? You're not really
Yeah.
messing around with like system mechanics anymore at this point. It's
No.
so what is playtesting of, a setting book or any kind of quote unquote world building publication?
Honestly, it can be heartbreaking because sometimes people don't pick up what you want them to,
Oh no.
but it's honestly, it's great, and it is important to get that out there. Like, Haro, we developed basically in front of the members of our website, so they kind of had a really nice bird's eye look of what the world was going to be like for a while. And from that, we got a lot of very magnificent questions that pointed out things we were missing, that I was like, oh, that's so baked into my brain. I didn't realize that it's not baked into the text, that no one else was going to get
Mhm.
that. So that allowed me to seal up a lot of holes that I didn't even realize were there. It also generated additional stuff where I was like, I didn't even think of that before, but you're right. That does need to be in there. Why wouldn't it be in there? So playtesting the actual world is super important, because again, as the person who created it, it's kind of like they say you can't edit your own work.
Mhm.
If you're the person that created the world, you're not going to see the little holes that the explorer is going to see when they're walking around in it. You're just not going to, because you have so much more than that's in the book in your head, that you're not going to realize the little things that are missing that you could still up and cinch up perfectly if you got other eyes on it. People who don't
Mhm.
know
Mhm.
the years and years of history that you've got locked away, they are experiencing it fresh, brand new eyes, no prior biases whatsoever. And you'll flesh it out so wonderfully by letting people just really play around in it. And not be offended when they miss something. So sometimes people, of course, play by virtue of playtesting. Sometimes someone will come to you and be like, "Hey, I didn't notice this," or "I don't understand this," and you're like, "I know exactly where you should have seen this, but you can't be a dick about it. Then why would you be there helping you out?" So you as long as you approach it, assume that people have the best intentions when they're bringing these things to you. Either explain to them like, "Oh, hey, here's where it's at. Do you think it could be clearer? Why did you miss it the first time?" Just out of curiosity. It helps you smooth everything out and make everything so realistic. And you approach it kind of like open mind, open heart. Don't take things too personally, and you'll have a better world for it.
Awesome. Awesome. I think that's fantastic advice. All right, let's do a couple of quick questions on tools, and then I want to go take a look at the RT Talks discussion thread to see if there's any questions in there. So yeah, tools, real quick and easy. I'd love to know if you use any specific tools for kind of cataloging your world as you're creating it. Is like I know there's a lot of these like websites or tools that promote themselves for game masters to kind of world build in that sense.
Yeah,
Are they of any value or use to you when you're writing out a setting or a world book, or is that kind of not really like not compatible?
me personally, no, because I
Right.
actually just the way that I work, the way that my brain works because there's a lot of really fucking awesome tools out there, World Anvil, City, and like all these different things. And they have all these prompts that you can fill in that make sure that you have so many details and everything. They really do a great job of giving you a clear path to build your world. Those things immediately make my brain just shut down. It's just the way that it works. So
Yeah, me too, actually. I
yeah, I just
I
can't
just too
immediately.
much too many things. I'm like, I just need a notepad. Let's just go with a notepad.
Exactly. Yeah. So honestly, it is. It's like if you saw my desk, it's a disgusting mess of post-it notes with ideas and things. It looks like the scribblings of a mad woman. So the post-it notes, those will eventually get added to like my notebook as I'm like talking to Keith and we're spitballing and we're doing different things. Write those down. And then Google Docs, like that's my entire system is just a Google Doc. And what I will do at the beginning of a project is I will build the table of contents, and it'll be kind of like a living table of contents of things that I'm like, if I was reading this book, what would I expect to see in here? What would I want to experience in here? And then I just start filling out the sections of the table of contents. And most of the time that's changed like a few times through the process because I'm like, oh, I actually think this would be better here. Or I think I need to add this section here. But that's kind of my personal process. My personal tool is the building the table of contents and then just filling in the blanks.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. And then yeah, like you're saying, it's like a living thing that changes as you go. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
One other thing that I think is pretty critical to the way a world or a setting is consumed is the way it's laid out and the way it's illustrated. I'd love to know what kind of advice you might have for finding the right people to help you bring your creative vision to light. And if there are specific tools that maybe you use to do any of that stuff too, you can throw it into your answer too.
Well, there's an amazing creative community called TTRPG Rising Tide that I would lean on. Yeah, it does inform.
I mean, it's a good answer. It's a
It's a
great
good
answer.
answer. No, you are right. The layout and the art will definitely color how people are looking at this. If you look at the preview that's available for Haro, you can see that everything is it's very bright, very colorful, very much how I wanted people to experience the world, how we wanted people to be able to experience it. So it's not the answer that people want because we're all broke, but realistically, you want someone who can do the layout for you that can take that vision and put it on paper the way that it best needs to be. Because
Mhm.
also my talent is not in layout. Like when I do the first rough drafts of a thing, I'll like throw it up into GM Binder or Home Brewery and then print the PDF out and show that to people. Like that's what I do. And that is if you saw the early access version of Haro, that's what I did. It looked horrible. It did not look like Haro. But yeah, you want the if you can afford someone to create the art, then you're basically acting as your own art director unless you're in a big setup.
Mhm.
So it's your responsibility to go, okay, does this feel like my world when I'm turning these pages? Are people going to remember they're in my world, or is something going to pull them out of it? Is something going to be jarring that's going to keep them from really immersing themselves in that book? So getting the right people to do the art or to do the layout, that's, the easiest answer, and the one, if you have the means to do so, is really the best answer, because those people are very specifically talented and can help you get you to where you need to be. If you are one man banding it, which we've all done and do from time to time, then you futz around with GM Binder, try to make it look how you think it would look. If you wanted people to look in your world, find stock art that has that fits in tone and how you want people to experience it in your eyes when you look at the stock art. Is this something that I could see playing in my head as I'm reading the book? Because that's really
Yeah.
what you're looking for. And then just kind of create. I have so many Shutterstock collections saved of, like, this looks like it would be good in horror. This looks like it would be good here. This looks like it would be good here. And I have them saved in all these different world folders. And when I go into that folder, it just looks like the world. So I'm passively collecting this stuff as it goes. And that serves as a really great way of doing like a Pinterest board kind of thing. But it's also, it helps you develop that look for your book that
Hmm.
you're going for.
Cool. Yeah, actually a really cool advice. I hadn't thought of having it kind of organized organically, and as you find stuff, you slot it away. That's really cool. All
Yeah.
right, let's run over really quickly to the Artie Talks discussion thread. We've got a lot of comments in here, and
Red.
I don't know if we're gonna get through all of them, but
I'll be quick.
but I do know, yeah, there's a handful of questions here that I think all sort of speak to the same central question. So we've got Zondrio, Mycroft, I think Saffron, Shiba Inu are all asking questions that center around how do you strike the balance of leaving enough space for the people who are going to be purchasing and playing in your world to create their own content within it versus staying true to all of the material that you've poured your heart into. So how do you kind of strike that balance of building your own world while leaving enough gaps for the people consuming it to play within it, if that makes sense?
Yeah. And it comes down to the difference between world building and narrative design. If it's important to the world for people to experience, then you include that in there. If it's important to a specific story that you have in your head, then that's something that might be able to be sacrificed at the end of the day if it's not going to take away people's experience of exploring the world.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to decide, like, is this a part of a singular story that I'm trying to tell, or is this a part of the world where one story takes place? And if you lean on that, that's going to be very helpful for making those decisions.
Cool, cool, cool. We got two more. This one comes from Frankto. Frankto asks, do you have any advice on finding gigs as a writer or world builder, especially with the saturation right now and the proliferation of AI? What kind of advice might you have in that space?
Well, keep an eye out here, obviously, opportunities and things to collaborate. A lot of, and the AI thing, it fucking sucks for all of us.
Yeah.
It's the worst. I hate that we're having to experience it. It's the world that we live in right now and probably will be for the foreseeable future. So we just need to kind of like lock arms and just forge ahead and support each other. The writing, just do the writing, even if you don't have a job for it yet. When you have the time, apply it to something that's important to you to create, and then submit that, put it in a jam and itch, just release it on itch, just get people's eyes on it. Just, if you show people that you have the talent that that you have, and they will respond to that. And then when those opportunities come up, you've already got things to pull from to show people, look, I can do this. I can design in the system. I can create these worlds. I can do these things. And I know that's like tried and true advice that people are probably tired of hearing by now, but it's really tried and true for a reason. Create these things, collaborate with people in this community, in any other community that you're in, find people that have those skills that you're missing and say, hey, we all want to do this. Let's create a thing. Let's put the thing out. And then the thing is out and you have that thing to reference forever going forward, which is awesome. And then you can jump on those opportunities. A lot of the opportunities in the TTRPG community, especially, they're looking for newer people. Are you going to find a full-time job right off the bat? Probably not, because, most of us don't have that at all. Most of us this is our lovely side gig that we're hoping to turn into something more one day. But you do the work, you have the talent, show people that you have the talent. And even if you're not getting massive amounts of sales on itch or anything, don't don't make that your concern. Right now, what you're doing is you're building your portfolio. So
Mhm.
create when you have the time, show that you have the skill, and you'll be able to apply that to opportunities as they pop up.
Yeah, 100%. And a while back, we had a conversation where we talked about revenue sharing, like splits and things like that. I think that is one of the coolest things to
100%.
consider when you're starting, right? Like Jess said, come to a community like the TTRPG Rising Tide, put your idea out there, get other people who want to contribute and want to work together. And if they're in the position to say, yeah, I'll do this for a 10th or a 15th or a 20th of the revenue as this thing produces and gets sold, if it gets sold, then I'm happy to just get something out into the world. And I think that that is a really great way, like you're saying, to build that portfolio, build connections with people who are in the space, who are kind of at the same entry point as you as a creator.
Yeah.
And those relationships will move your career, quote unquote, in the TTRPG space forward, I think, for sure. All right, I'm looking at the clock. We're at time, Jess. So for anybody who asked questions in the RT Talks discussion thread that we didn't get a chance to get to, I'm sorry. Maybe we can take a peek at it after and type up some answers for you. But before we say our goodbyes, Jess, I wanted to pass the microphone back over to you to give you one last chance to say any thoughts or considerations that we didn't get a chance to touch on tonight as it pertains to world building as a professional endeavor. And then also, of course, when you're done doing that, I'd love for you to talk to us about where folks can find your upcoming projects and find Underground Oracle, all of that good stuff.
Overall, as an overall takeaway, I would say that, like I said, from flavor text in the bottom of a magic card to like a 400-page world book, like it's all world building. And if it's something that you have a passion for, if it's something that you enjoy, then do it. Realistically, at the end of the day, and I did something that I had to come to terms with myself. You're kind of the only person standing in your way if you want to see this thing come to life in some way. And it might be because you expect it to be this huge thing that I have no means or time to do right now. But if you kind of rein those expectations in, you can get your world out and get people experiencing it, and you can have that joy that you're looking for. It's definitely something that is achievable, and definitely something that you can do at any scale. So whether you're putting a small zine out, whether you're putting a huge world book out, no matter what it is, get what you love out in front of people, and they're going to appreciate it. And if what you love is this world that you've been playing around in, this paracosm that you've built up for yourself and your friends, and or even just in the back of your mind, get that out in front of people, and you're going to find people who enjoy it no matter what. Like, someone will find it and they'll be touched by that, and that's the best part of world building. It really is.
For sure, for sure. And you've mentioned a few of the awesome projects that you've been working on. Can you remind us of those projects and where people can find them?
Absolutely. Blue Sky is the only social media that I personally use. So if you follow me from Blue Sky and tell me you follow me from here, let me know. But undergroundoracle.com is where we have all of our Underground Oracle titles. The biggest things we have right now: Harrow the Blighted Plain, the free previews available. The book will be coming out in a month. It's an amazing world book that I can't wait for you all to experience. In addition, we have a lot of Cypher Shorts volumes, which are all little micro worlds for everybody to explore in 3 to 4 hours. And we're going to be launching Kickstarter for that in the next few months. That sort of just is a shelf-ready compilation of all of the one-shots that we've done. So it's like called Cypher Dimensions, and it is because it's all about exploring a variety of worlds at your table. So that's kind of our whole thing, which is why I'm doing this talk. But yeah.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So yeah, I hope everybody listening goes to, take a look at all of Jess's work. It's all fantastic stuff. And Jess, I wanted to thank you for two things tonight. Thank you for being here, spreading your knowledge, spreading your joy for world building, and also thank you for everything that you do for the TTRPG Rising Tide Discord community. Really, you are, one of the pillars that enables us to be here tonight, enables us to find awesome friends in the TTRPG space to do our projects. So thank you for everything that you do for us also.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for being here. It's amazing. You guys make this community the most awesome place on the internet, and I stand by that.
100%, 100%. So go follow Jess, go follow Underground Oracle, go follow Keith too while you're at it. And then Go follow the TTRPG Rising Tide on our socials if you aren't already, and help us spread the good word of this amazing Discord community for TTRPG creatives by TTRPG creatives. If you're listening on YouTube or podcast land, give us a like, give us a follow, give us a 5-star review. Those things help get the algorithm on our side. It's, it's all we can do really to help get the algorithm on our side. And last but not least, I'm Matt at roll_play_chat on all the socials. And this has been another RT Talks. Thank you everybody for being here, and stay tuned for our next RT Talks episode in October. And remember, a rising tide lifts all boats.